Welcome to the Daily Word today. My name is Curtis. I'm one of the pastors at Redeemer Bible Church, and I'm thankful that we get to spend time like this talking about Jesus. I mean, how great is that, really? So let's jump in. We're going to be looking at Matthew chapter 12 today, the first 21 verses. And in these verses, we're given the opportunity to see two different clashes that Jesus has with the Pharisees as it pertains to the Sabbath. Now, the Pharisees were the Jewish religious leaders. They were prominent. They held positions of power and influence. And so he's going to be going up against them. And in these two stories, we actually get to see two mic drop moments from Jesus, which is pretty cool. But first, what is the Sabbath? Well, God instituted the Sabbath in Exodus 20, verses 8 through 11, as a blessed and holy day of rest for his people, the Israelites. And it was done in remembrance that he created the universe in 6 days, and then he rested on the seventh. And I don't think it's a coincidence that Matthew shares these stories that we're about to look at about the Pharisees and the Sabbath and Jesus clashing with them right after Jesus invites all who are weary and heavy laden from trying to earn their salvation to come to him and to find rest in him and to find rest for their souls. So let's take a look at Jesus' first clash with the Pharisees in chapter 12, starting in verse 1. It says, "At that time Jesus went through the grain fields on the Sabbath. His disciples were hungry, and they began to pluck the heads of grain and to eat. But when the Pharisees saw it, they said to him, 'Look, your disciples are doing what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath.'" So the Pharisees here are scolding Jesus for his hungry disciples plucking heads of grain to eat on the Sabbath as they walk. But as usual, they have it all wrong and backwards. So verses 3 through 8 record Jesus' response to them as he corrects them. And in verses 3 through 7, he explains that the law of the Sabbath doesn't prohibit acts that are born out of necessity. We see that in verses 3 through 4. Or acts that are service to the Lord. That's verses 5 through 6. Or finally, it doesn't prohibit doing things out of mercy, which is verse 7. And so keep that last one in mind from verse 7 as we head into verse 9 in just a minute. And then Jesus in verse 8 has his first mic drop moment when he says, after explaining and interpreting for them what the law actually says about the Sabbath, he says, "For the Son of Man is the Lord of the Sabbath." This is a clear claim of deity because God implemented the Sabbath, and only God could be the Lord of the Sabbath. And the Pharisees wouldn't have missed this, and it actually helps explain their response, which is not a good one and violent and murderous, in verse 14 in just a bit. And so Jesus, being the Lord of the Sabbath, also makes it clear that he has the right to interpret the law. Here, we're talking about the law of the Sabbath. And not only were they misunderstanding it, but they also had added countless man-made rules to the Sabbath that the people had to keep. And after this, so we have this first moment. Jesus has sort of this mic drop moment, right? He's the Lord of the Sabbath. It says that he goes into the synagogue, and this is where he's going to have his second clash of this chapter with the Pharisees. So in verse 10, the Pharisees continue to harass him and try to trap him. Here's what it says. "And a man was there with a withered hand, and they, the Pharisees, asked him, 'Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath?'" Kind of pointing to Exhibit A over there. But Scripture gives us their motives so that they might accuse Jesus. And so this now brings us back to verse 7 when Jesus tells them that they don't know what Hosea 6:6 means when it says that God desires compassion and not a sacrifice. You see, the Old Testament law didn't prohibit healing on the Sabbath. It was Jewish tradition, extra-biblical rules that prohibited it unless someone was going to die. In that case, you could. And so Jesus here uses logic on them in verses 11 and 12 in pointing out that they would save one of their own sheep on the Sabbath if it fell into a pit. And ultimately, how much more important is a human being than a sheep? He then affirms, as the Lord of the Sabbath, that it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath. And in light of that, he has his second mic drop moment in verse 13. It says, "Then he said to the man, 'Stretch out your hand.' And the man stretched it out, and it was restored, healthy like the other." Now, can you picture that moment? Jesus' answer to the Pharisees is, yes, it is lawful to heal on the Sabbath. And not only am I going to tell you it's lawful, I'm going to heal this man. But as I do, I am going to prove to you that I'm the Lord of the Sabbath, that I'm God. And so how do the Pharisees respond? Well, unfortunately, they reject the Messiah, who is standing right in front of them. And in verse 14, it says, and this is tragic, they went out and conspired against him, how to destroy him. They know he's claiming to be God, and Jesus is infuriating them by speaking the truth of Scripture and challenging their power and their position among the people. And so here we see that the Pharisees have turned the Sabbath, a day of rest, a holy day, a day of blessing and rest for the benefit of God's people. They've turned it into a burden for them, and Jesus refutes them. However, both of these interactions with Jesus that he has with the Pharisees bring us back to his words in Matthew 11 that we looked at yesterday, where Jesus says, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." All right, that's it for today. I'll see you tomorrow. God bless.